sport always played a major role in my life. I was born overseas, grew up in Asia, travelled around a lot. Parents were moving around a lot. So for me, sport was not only a passion, but it was a way of actually meeting people. It's a way of integrating into new places, new countries, and so on. So it was always there, underlying as a sort of an area that was of real interest to me. And then I studied economics and business, but really with a strongest interest in marketing. And then after I graduated, I went down a fairly, I suppose, a pretty traditional path in terms of career development if you wanted to go the marketing route. I started off at Shell as a graduate trainee, fantastic company, but in those days, marketing and brands was not really a big thing for oil companies. They were more about locating oil, finding oil, more on the engineering side, and brand loyalty and so on didn't really exist for them. So I wanted to have much more of a consumer-facing approach. Hence, I went to Unilever, which is a great consumer-driven, brand-driven organisation. And then from there, I went to Mars M&M's, which again is known for being very highly consumer-focused. And then I had as often happens in life, I think. I mean, you can plan certain things, and sometimes stuff just happens and things come along. And I had a chance meeting with somebody. You're way too young to remember this guy, but there was a guy called Mark McCormack who created a company called IMG, which is pretty much held up as being the organisation and the man who really invented sports marketing. Starting off with Arnold Palmer in Cleveland, Ohio, and then branching out into all sorts of sports. And he really invented the world of sports marketing. And he was quite a fairly charismatic character in himself. There were documentaries made on him, travelled around the world, covered more miles than any other person in the world, and so on. And I had a chance meeting with him, and we were discussing things. And as much as I liked being in the consumer world, I found it really difficult to get incredibly passionate about frozen peas and Twix bars. It just didn't quite sort of do it for me. And he just we were just talking about careers and stuff, and he said, really the one thing I've always learned is that if you're going to do something, you need to be passionate about it. If you're passionate about it and you love it, the chances are you'll be quite good, and therefore if you're quite good, the chances are you'll succeed and you'll develop and your career will go on. And it just seemed as simple as that. And I thought, well, actually, I've had a really good grounding, a really good background from a business perspective and from a marketing perspective, but my passion is sport. And so from that moment on, I thought, well, I've really got to try and get into the sports industry. And again, I think sometimes once you have a clear direction in your own mind of where you want to go, coincidences happen. I don't think they're actually coincidences. Maybe you're just more open to proposals or whatever. So literally within about 2 weeks, I was working for Reebok in Asia, initially as marketing director for the region. Then I ran the region as senior VP. And then I moved to Adidas, and I spent most of my time in the sports industry with Adidas, never based in the UK actually, always based in Germany, in the head office. But I had an office in Portland, Oregon, one in Tokyo, one in Shanghai, and obviously one in Germany. So quite a lot of travel. I'm a massive Three Stripes fan. I'm still very much an Adidas person, I think, when it comes to that world. But I'd been abroad for so long, and I felt that I wanted to come back to the UK. And I wanted to stay in sport, and it sounds a bit altruistic maybe, but I wanted to perhaps give something back to my own country for a change, and have sport connected to a Union Jack. And again, chance things happen, and I was on holiday in Italy in 2013, contacted by Seb, and they were looking for a new CEO for the BOA, and it was just the perfect fit. The obvious unique opportunity is in the BOA's case is the possibility of working with our nation's finest Olympic athletes. I mean, I think and virtually everyone, if not everyone, that you come into contact with are inspirational in their own way. They've got amazing stories of commitment, passion, dedication, starting from the earliest age, and sometimes we feel an obligation to make sure that we're doing everything we can to enable them to fulfil their dreams, and that's a fantastic opportunity. I think we've just come out of a process where the government kicked off a consultancy process to develop a new strategy for sport in the UK, and there are multiple stakeholders that fed into that. We have a particular interest around the continued performance of high-performance elite sport, so the ability to actually contribute into that debate and help shape government policy around sport in the UK, particularly if you're very passionate about sport and you believe that sport can be a force for good and be a force for positive change, and can address a lot of the issues that we're all usual suspects of: well-being, obesity, tolerance across different groups in society and so on. The opportunity to work in that environment while you're also very passionate about sport itself is unique. Challenges, I think probably most people who work in sport will tell you it's not a 5-day, 9 to 5 existence. So you need to have personal relationships that are quite resilient, because there's a lot of sport that goes on at weekends, there's a lot of international travel. It sounds incredibly glamorous, but when you're doing it as a career and it's 365 days a year, then you have to love it. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to do it. So I think the challenge is balancing perhaps your personal life with your professional life. Yeah, my views on that haven't ever changed really, but in some ways they can be particularly relevant now. I think everybody looks for integrity in leadership now, and it's never more necessary than with some of the recent stories that we've seen. So I think if not just in sport but in business and life generally, I think people are looking for integrity in their leadership. I think one of the key things is vision. One thing I'll guarantee in sport or in business is that things never stay still. They're always changing. And if you're wedded to one particular way of doing things and you don't have a vision of where you want to get to in the future, then the chances are you're probably not going to get there. So I think having a really clear vision, and hopefully it's the right vision, but having a really clear vision of where you get to, I think is important. And then you have to get the organisation to buy into that vision. They need to believe it. They're not going to sign up for a vision they don't think is correct. So then I think issues like communication, clear communication, everyone knowing their role, their contribution, and the part they play in the achievement of that vision, I think is key. And then again, it's a highly demanding thing from an energy point of view, so you've got to have real commitment and drive.